Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Thanks for joining me. Today is March 3rd, 2019. I know I missed my episode with you guys on Friday. I happened to be out of town, but I wanted to catch up because I promised you that I would deliver on some news in regards to the Clinton Foundation investigation. And what I wanted to talk about there was just a few things because this did not get much media attention at all. I think really not much of anybody covered this story. And had this been reversed, had this been involving President Trump and his foundation, or really anything to do with the president, this would have been all over the news and we would still be talking about it to this day. However, this has to deal with the former president and the former Secretary of State, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, respectively. And so it gets put on the back burner and nothing gets discussed, nothing gets done, at least not by the mainstream media and not much by Congress. But as I'm going to explain to you guys here shortly, there might be some investigations underway by the FBI and the Department of Justice. So with that, let me sort of kick this off by explaining this was a hearing back in December. Okay, again, not much media coverage at all. And this had to do with a couple of financial investigators by the name of Lawrence Doyle and John Moynihan. Now, who these gentlemen are, they are in the business of investigating nonprofit organizations, sometimes referred to as 501c3s, which is just an article of the tax code that gives them their designation, like a 401k, that type of thing. It's just an IRS designation that these companies will file for that type of industry, that they're saying, well, we're a charitable organization or we're a hospital or whatever, and they file the requisite filings with the IRS, and the IRS makes a determination, yes, you are a charitable organization, you are tax exempt. One of the interesting things about this that you'll hear, if you can find this on YouTube if you were to research or search Clinton Foundation investigation, this would come up. It's about an hour-long hearing, and I do recommend that you take a listen to it because it's very informative. It's no nonsense. These guys are professional. It's actually a little bit comical too because a couple of the congressmen and women who were there in attendance over this oversight committee hearing were getting a little testy with Mr. Doyle and Mr. Moynihan, but they weren't having any of it. They stuck to their guns. They were professional, and I do recommend that you take an hour out of your day, break it up here or there, and take a listen because there was some very informative information throughout the entire hearing. One of the interesting things, just a little background on 501c3s, just their relative size and scope. I did not know this until I actually listened to this testimony. These organizations, their top line, their revenues annually are around $1.7 to $1.8 trillion. That's ridiculous. That's staggering. I had no idea it was that much. That's about 8-9% of our GDP. And wait for this one because this is what they said, and you look this up and it's true. If non-profit organizations were a standalone economy, they would be the 10th largest economy in the world. It would be larger than the GDP of Canada. That's insane. That's insane. Now, on one hand, it's good if these are actually charitable organizations doing good for families and thousands, if not millions of people in this country or around the world. Now, if they're doing that much good, that's fantastic, but that's why Lawrence Doyle and John Moynihan are in business. They look at this and they say, well, who's minding the store? That is a lot of money. That's the 10th largest economy in the world. Is every dollar accounted for? Is everything on the up and up? So let's get into this. These gentlemen are not affiliated with the Clinton Foundation, with Mr. and Mrs. Clinton in any way. They are not what you would classify to be internal whistleblowers, meaning somebody who works inside the Clinton Foundation, who's ringing the alarm bell saying there's a lot of stuff going on here. That's not what they do. They were never employed by Mr. and Mrs. Clinton. They are financial investigators. That's what they do. That's their business. They have the right to look into 501c3 companies to see if they are on the up and up. So they do that in a couple of ways. Obviously, some of this information is available to the public, so they can go and they can receive those financials that way, or they can request and file for FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests, and they would submit that to the IRS because that's where those documents would be housed. They would get those documents, and in conjunction with what is publicly available, they would conduct their financial and accounting analysis and make a determination, in their opinion, if it warrants submitting their findings to the IRS and perhaps the FBI for fraud and abuse of the law. So what you can classify these guys as is as external whistleblowers. That's what they do. That's how they make their living. Because the law states that if the IRS moves forward and says, yes, these nonprofit organizations are misclassified, they have committed fraud, and they pursue legal actions after them, and they recoup whatever damages, obviously in the amount of, could be millions, tens of millions of dollars. These two gentlemen and other companies like them would receive a percentage of that, and it could range anywhere from 10% to 30%. Okay, so that's just a little bit of background on what's going on here. We have external whistleblowers. They are not affiliated with the Clinton Foundation. If you watch this testimony, you will tell just in their language and body language that they are apolitical. This is how they make their living. They're basically like injury lawyers. They will not make any money doing this unless the IRS moves forward, sues the Clinton Foundation, and wins in court. Then these guys can get paid. Otherwise, it's out of pocket. It's out of pocket. Now, what I'm going to get to, if they prove to be right and the IRS goes after them and they win, well, these guys are going to make out like bandits. If this proves to be true, which I'm going to get to in a little bit. So there's a couple other things I want to talk about because this parallels with all of the investigations taking place in regards to President Trump and his inner and outer circles. One such figure would relate to Paul Manafort. Remember, Paul Manafort was President Trump's campaign chairman for a short period of time. And he has a notorious background, an infamous background in politics. You know, he's not afraid to get dirty and grease palms and do this, that, and the other. But he's made a successful career out of it, as have many others. Well, Paul Manafort is in jail. He was tried and convicted, obviously. And one of the reasons why was because of FARA, F-A-R-A, the Federal Agent Registration Act. Remember, he had some dealings, not with Russia, but with Ukraine. With Ukraine. He didn't dot some I's, didn't cross some T's. So he got in trouble. Okay? Hey, the law's the law. I'm not saying because he's with President Trump he's exempt from, he's not. And neither are the Clintons. Nobody is above the law. Okay? Let's just make that perfectly clear. But I want to draw these parallels because I've been telling you that there might be some fireworks coming. It could be March Madness. Who knows? But I do believe from this testimony that there are things taking place behind the scenes in the FBI, in the DOJ. So when these gentlemen conducted their analysis of the Clinton Foundation, and this is going back years, by the way, years, they have concluded that this is a criminal enterprise, that they have broken the law. Okay, now you can watch their testimony and they break it down and they go into further detail. I'm just here to give you the overall gist of what's taking place. Okay, but both of these guys said this is a criminal enterprise. There are things that the Clintons have done that violate 501c3 rules. Okay, they are saying that this is not a nonprofit organization. They have undergone activities that would qualify as profit-making institutions. One such example that they gave was when reference to brokering a deal, a pharmaceutical deal, with Mozambique. Mozambique, the government was in need of some pharmaceuticals. They reached out to the Clintons. The Clintons worked with some pharmaceutical companies, and they collected money. Now, I don't know how that's not for profit. It seems very much to me that that is a profit-making scheme. And if Mr. and Mrs. Clinton wanted to go into business to make a profit, they have every right to go into business to make a profit. And I don't demonize that. But if you're going to set up a front that says you're a 501c3, you got a problem now. You have a problem now. You're both supposed to be intelligent people, highly educated, both lawyers. You have a bunch of money. I think you have the ability and the means to hire people to do some of these things for you. Dot your I's, cross your T's. Do it right. Do it properly. But you didn't, did you? Now you might be in trouble if, and this is a huge if justice truly is blind. And we know from back in 2016 during the campaign when Jim Comey, the former director of the FBI, came out and said, she's guilty of all this stuff, but we're not going to prosecute her because nobody in their right mind, no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute Secretary Clinton. Now, why would he say that? I mean, come on. There wasn't any unreasonable prosecutor there in the FBI, in the DOJ. I mean, that's just ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. Now, he's gone. He's gone. Is he under investigation? I don't know. Could be. He's definitely got some issues. Him and his buddy Andrew McCabe. They're trying to stay on the same page. We're going to see what happens. This could be some fireworks. But back to the Clinton Foundation. These gentlemen also had the ability to interview a couple employees of the Clinton Foundation, high-ranking officials in the organization, only to find that they confessed that the Clintons used a lot of those donations for personal use, which is obviously against the rules. You use money for expenses. I mean, if this is going to be your job, you will get paid a salary. You have administration fees. But if you're a true charity, the majority of what you receive should be paid out. Well, that's not the case with the Clinton Foundation, which is no surprise. It's also no surprise that now that Hillary Clinton is out of government, their donations have just dropped off considerably. It's also important to note, I think, that it was only a small number of donors who contributed the vast amount of money. So, pay for play. Could that be what was going on here? What Donald Trump has accused them of? What many others have accused them of? These investigators, they seem to say, yep, that was the case. That was the case. They have a health initiative foundation that falls under the Clinton Foundation. One of those senior officials who was interviewed by these gentlemen told her friends and other people that she used to work for, do not donate to the Clinton Foundation because the money will never see the light of day in regards to helping people who actually need the money. This is serious stuff. If this was President Trump, he would have been impeached already. No question about it. But instead, this is the Clintons. This is a hearing done in December. Nothing is being done in Congress about this, at least not that we know of. This was the House Oversight Committee, which was then chaired by Representative Meadows out of North Carolina, the Freedom Caucus. You see a lot of Mr. Meadows and Mr. Jordan of Ohio, the Freedom Caucus guys that try to bring these hearings, try to make us stink when they can. But the Republicans are no longer in charge of the Congress, so they don't chair this committee anymore. That is now chaired by Elijah Cummings. Again, this is the same committee that just had the hearings with Michael Cohen, President Trump's former attorney and fixer. So we had that three-ring circus. We went over that earlier. Will Mr. Cummings follow up with these financial investigators on the Clinton Foundation? Highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. But what was some other fascinating information that these gentlemen gave during their testimony? They have submitted their findings to the IRS back in 2017. Okay, so at the time of this investigation, it was over a year. And just for point of reference, they were there voluntarily. They were asked to come before Congress. They weren't subpoenaed. They weren't forced, nothing like that. They were there voluntarily of their own free will. Okay, just so you know. Well, they submitted their documents back in August of 2017 to the IRS. The IRS then gives them a letter saying, we are not moving forward at this time, but we encourage you to appeal our decision and to provide further evidence, and we will very much reconsider. Now, that's according to their testimony, that they were encouraged to appeal their decision. I don't know if that's standard operating procedure or this is a one-off, but that's their testimony. Okay? So they do that. They have other information. Well, what was some of the other information that they actually had and resubmitted to the IRS? They had pictures, photographs of FBI agents down in Little Rock, Arkansas, filling a 747 or a 757 airplane with documents from the Clinton Foundation. Can you believe this? The FBI is down there grabbing documents from the Clinton Foundation, putting them on an airplane, taking them back to Washington, D.C., most likely Washington, D.C. Maybe they were going to Utah, and I'll get to why Utah in a minute, to be investigated. This is what's going on. So we'll see what the IRS does. It's going to be very difficult now for the IRS to deny this because I think, if I recall from the testimony, it wasn't just FBI, but there were other IRS agents there as well. Because these gentlemen, Lawrence Doyle and John Moynihan, they also filed paperwork with the FBI. So what's going on here? Seems to me that somebody's taken this rather seriously, their findings. Now, there's no leaks. There's no major discussions of this. Is this the calm before the storm? I mean, so many other things leak out all over the place in Washington, D.C., or anything that has to do with high-profile politicians or businessmen and women. We don't hear much of anything. We had this testimony, public hearing, for an hour. Where was CNN? Where was MSNBC? You don't even have Fox talking about a lot of this. So what's going on here? Because again, if this was President Trump, you would have heard about this every day. We'd still be talking about it. Still be talking about it. Now, another interesting thing that these gentlemen brought up during their testimony is in regards to U.S. Attorney John Huber out of the office in Utah. That's who's overseeing this investigation. And I say investigation because Chairman Meadows asked Doyle and Moynihan, have you ever been in contact with the FBI or the Justice Department? And they said, yes, we have been. And they went into their conversation. It is their understanding that the FBI and DOJ is investigating the Clinton Foundation. Now, the other interesting thing that these gentlemen brought up is not only have they submitted these documents to the IRS and the FBI, but they are saying they have other information depending on what the IRS and the FBI does. They may have further grounds to take other actions against the Clinton Foundation. Now, they didn't go into detail because that's their livelihood, and they're just not going to disclose all of that information, which, again, is part of the comedy of the back and forth heated arguments between some of the congressmen and Doyle and Moynihan. But this is all very telling. Not only is it telling that you have the testimony, but the silence of the mainstream media, and even some members of Congress who are aware of this, is deafening. It's deafening. This was not the three-ring circus that the Michael Cohen testimony was, where you had a full deck. Everybody and their mother was there to ask questions and to see what was going on, because that was a three-ring circus to get President Trump. This had to do with the Clintons, so nobody cares. So there was only a handful of congressmen at this hearing, which is shameful. That goes to show you that maybe justice in this country isn't blind, but I'm praying that it is. Because you can't go after Paul Manafort for forgetting to dot his I's and cross his T's and then just say, well, it was the Clintons, that's okay, they're allowed to get away with it. And that was just part of it. That's not the whole thing. Here's the numbers, according to these gentlemen in their financial analysis. Anywhere from $400 million to $2.5 billion is subject to taxation. $400 million to $2.5 billion is subject to taxation. And not only in their findings do they think that the Clinton Foundation is subject to those taxes, but also some of their donors. Now, you do the math. You do the math on the tax rate and penalties and fines and whatever else the IRS may decide to levy against them if they pursue the Clinton Foundation in court. 10% of that, 20% of those damages, 30%. Depending on what they go after, I mean, these guys can pocket a huge amount of money. 120 million plus. I think it would be worth it. And they're doing a civic duty at the same time. This is fraud, this is abuse. This is what they do for a living. That's their livelihood. So you can't blame them for looking into some of these organizations. That's a lot of money. Did they know that they were going to find something? They might have had their suspicions. It's their livelihood. They know where to look. But this is very telling. The other interesting thing has to do with further conversations that they had with John Huber's office, where they were asking for documents. And this seems all sketchy to me, very sketchy to me. Because Doyle and Moynihan had sent documents to the DOJ, to the Utah office, a couple of times. Okay? Then they had this hearing scheduled in Congress, this oversight committee hearing. John Huber was supposed to be there. He was not. He was not. Before this hearing took place, there was a few phone calls very shortly before, following up with the case asking for documents. These documents had already been sent to the office, supposedly, twice before. So now, Doyle and Moynihan had to send the documents for a third time to Utah. And then there was questions. Well, what does this mean? Can you clarify this exhibit? Can you go over this a little bit more? Give me some more background, some more detail. And they did. But John Huber was not there, which is very telling. What does that mean if he wasn't there? Well, if it's an ongoing investigation, he can't speak to it. So why show up? Do you get that, ladies and gentlemen? These could be some serious fireworks if you have a U.S. attorney looking into the Clinton Foundation, if you have the FBI looking into the Clinton Foundation, if you have the IRS looking into the Clinton Foundation. This is their own doing, by the way. This is entirely their own doing. This pay-for-play, acting as a federal agent or a foreign agent. Just file the proper paperwork. That's all you had to do. FARA, Foreign Agent Registration Act. Why do you have to cover yourself as a 501c3 nonprofit organization? You want to be in business to make a profit? Set up a business to make a profit. You don't care anyways. The Clintons, they couldn't care less about anything. Ruthless, which is fine. You can be ruthless. But it just always amazes me how they always have to walk this fine line of legality and illegality. Well, it seems like they may have finally gotten caught this time. So if justice is blind, they will finally get their day in court. I just hope that these officials in the FBI and the Department of Justice have the nerve and the courage, and I shouldn't even have to say that because it's just simply their job. That's what they signed up for. Nobody is above the law to bring charges against the Clintons on these findings because they are damning. They are damning. Again, I suggest highly that you take an hour out of your day, break it up if you have to, and YouTube Clinton Foundation investigation, Lawrence Doyle, John Moynihan, and see for yourself. If this breaks, if this comes out of the office of the Inspector General with all of this other Trump-Russia collusion BS that we all know now is complete and utter BS, now it might be a 180. Now the fireworks might start to go off. Might start off as some firecrackers, but we'll see what leads to the grand finale because these investigations aren't going to stop on President Trump until something like this Clinton Foundation, or something further as far as McCabe and Comey and Bruce Orr and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, you know the names, until something flips on their head, they will continue to go after President Trump. I will keep you updated on this. I haven't found many other stories or updates in regards to the Clinton Foundation investigation, but there is most definitely something going on because there was a congressional hearing. These gentlemen make their living doing this. They have spent a number of years and resources doing this. They want some money if they can get it, and they believe that they can get it if the IRS pursues actions against them. So this isn't just civil, this is criminal. They can be locked up. Will they? If they're guilty of a crime, they get their day in court. They are innocent until proven guilty, just like everybody else. But I want them to have their day in court because of what they've done over the years. Pay for play, the arrogance that they have. And again, that is not grounds to throw somebody in jail. But their history and abuse of power and just disregard for some decency, it just upsets me. It's just so plain. It's like the mafia in a lot of regards. You know they're doing something. It's just hard to make a case. Well, they finally have it here. And just like they got Al Capone with tax evasion, they may finally get the Clintons with tax evasion. Oh, wouldn't it be sweet justice to finally start draining the swamp and get some of the leading members. Thanks for joining me today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you found this informative. I will continue to keep you updated as things become known. Fireworks may be coming. It may very well be March Madness for a whole host of reasons. Please like, share, subscribe. Get the news out. Spread the word. Leave your comments. I would love to hear from you. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Kreitis. Godspeed.